Hello and welcome to World Talks here on TVP World, where every world matters. I'm Diana Skaya. Leaders from the Baltic Sea region have convened for the annual forum of the EU strategy for the Baltic, while the Nordic Council is focused on peace and security in the Arctic. Now, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy has also addressed the Council, urging for true peace in Ukraine. Now, these discussions come at a crucial time for Europe's security landscape. And here to help us unpack the events, I'm joined by Andreas Umland, analyst at the Swedish Institute of International Affairs. Good evening, sir. Thank you so much for being with us here this evening on TVP World Talks.
Good evening. Thanks for having me.
So take us through, firstly, the main goals of this year's annual forum of the EU strategy for the Baltic Sea region. Why can you say that it's significant for regional stability?
The obvious background of these meetings is now the war in Ukraine, and there are I would say, two dimensions to it. First of all, the Baltic countries and the Nordic countries are among the most supportive countries of Ukraine. If you look at the both the rhetorical and the material support, this is very impressive. The statements are the most unambivalent from the Baltic and Nordic countries, but also the help is impressive in terms of, for instance, the help in terms of the GDP per person or per country. This is higher than in other European countries, and that goes not only for countries like Lithuania, Estonia, and Latvia, but also for countries like Denmark, Finland, Sweden, and Norway. So we have here a group of countries that is particularly supportive of Ukraine. The other dimension of this meeting and of these consultations is now that if Russia continues its imperialistic policies in other regions, then the Baltic region would perhaps one of the most threatened ones. Let's say a country like Estonia, which has on its border the most Russian city outside Russia, the city of Narva, on Estonian soil. And Putin has already indicated that once Peter the Great conquered Narva, and that may have been an indication that he has similar plans. So for these countries, I'm just mentioning here Estonia as one example, for these countries also the outcome of the war and the Russian foreign policies have a dimension that concerns the national security, directly the national security of these countries. And that is a difference to countries like Germany, France, Italy, Spain, that do not have this urgent need of solving the issue.
So would you say now, from everything that you said, you mentioned many significant points here, but would you say that we can consider that the primary concerns for Nordic countries regarding Arctic security is the fear of Russia, is the fear of Russia's imperialistic goals, and to, of course, target the Arctic?
Maybe not the Arctic in the first place. I think the Baltic Sea region is the main target, but these are, these countries are all very close to each other, and the Arctic is another theater, so to say. But I would say that the Arctic, the more northern territories, are perhaps a field of so-called hybrid activity for Russia, where it will try to, and is already trying to increase tensions, not by direct military actions, but by other actions. On the verge of a hot war. Countries like Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania, on the other hand, are under a direct threat from Russia, and they were parts of the Tsarist Empire, of the Soviet Empire. So for them, this is a very urgent issue, and the other Nordic countries, they are closely related, of course, and they have close relations to these three Baltic nations. And so it's a region that has now very similar interests vis-a-vis Russia, and also regions that I think on the whole very well understands that the outcome of the war in Ukraine will have then also crucial repercussions, after effects for the Baltic region, for the Arctic region, for the whole Nordic hemisphere.
Mr. Andreas, President Zelenskyy called for a true peace for Ukraine during his address. Now, what specific support does Ukraine expect to gain from the Nordic countries in terms of defense and humanitarian aid?
Well, this is, all a matter that everybody knows already very well. It's mainly about weaponry and ammunition and about training for Ukraine's military. These are obviously the main issues, but there are also other humanitarian issues, and the Nordic and the Baltic countries are smaller countries if you compare them to countries like Poland or Germany, France, or Italy. But they have experience, and they have also their own weapons industries, and above all, they have the willingness and the decisiveness to help Ukraine, more so than, unfortunately, many of the continental European countries further west.
How is the EU strategy for the Baltic Sea region aiming to strengthen cooperation in areas beyond security, like environmental protection or economic resilience, for instance?
Well, these are all topics that now become sort of related. Economic resilience is obviously something that has also a direct military implication for military capabilities. And even environmental issues are now becoming interlinked with military issues, because the war in Ukraine creates lots of environmental problems and has largely repercussions, above all for Ukraine, where I'm currently, but also for other regions. And so this is now all interlinked. It's not only about the war and not only about Russia, but these are now the dominating themes for these countries.
Let's shift to climate change as a topic for a moment. How could the melting ice in the Arctic influence some security dynamics and international relations in the region? And is this going to be also spoken on during this meeting?
Frankly, I don't have now the exact program in my head, but obviously these issues have traditionally played a large role, especially for the Nordic countries. They have been forerunners in many ways in the protection of the environment, and that's why they will obviously continue focusing on that. Although, as I mentioned, these until recently dominant topics have now become actually secondary topics, because the war and also its repercussions for the environment have become more important.
So how are they going to, you're talking about all these issues going on, especially with the war. How are these Nordic and Baltic countries going to balance these security concerns with the goal of long-term peace in Europe?
Unlike in many of the continental West European countries, I think there is an understanding that in order to get long-term peace in Europe, you need a just peace for Ukraine, and not some sort of victory peace, Siegfrieden, as we say in Germany, where Russia would come out with some fruit of this aggression, some result, some victory that it can then celebrate. Because if Russia comes out with some sort of advantage of this operation, then this will be very bad for the future of Russia, because then Russia will try perhaps to do that again, and then perhaps not only in Ukraine, but let's say also in Estonia or in Finland. But also that will be then encouragement for other revisionist, revanchist countries to try something similar to what Russia has been doing. And it will be also a very large warning then for countries that would compare themselves rather to Ukraine, and that would think we should not be as trustful of international law and international organizations as the Ukrainians, but rather we should arm ourselves, perhaps with weapons of mass destruction. So I think this understanding is much better developed in Northern Europe than in some of the West European continental countries that that are sort of living in a secure world. I mean here, for instance, Germany, which I know best, and where sometimes people believe that there's peace in Europe because, let's say, the Germans are so peaceful, yeah, or the French or the Italian, and if we are only peaceful, then there will be also peace. And they don't see that, of course, our peace in Europe is very much secured by NATO, by the nuclear umbrella from the US, by our solidarity, and by Article 5 of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization.
And do you think that also following Zelensky's address, are we going to see a shift in Nordic involvement in the Ukraine-Russia conflict?
If Trump wins in the elections in November soon, then I think the European countries, not only the Nordic countries, will have to fundamentally rethink their approach to Ukraine. And I would also think that in such a dire situation, then the Nordic countries and the Baltic countries, perhaps also Poland, could take a leading role in this fundamental reorientation, because if the United States disappear as a firm supporter of Ukraine, then the situation will be very different, and then we Europeans will have to take care of this by ourselves, and that will demand an enormous change of political direction and also direction of finances. And then the Nordic and Baltic countries could play a crucial role.
What do you mean exactly by they would have to rethink a fundamental approach? Can you give us an example?
Well, if the US stops supporting Ukraine, then we will have to do that. I mean, by we, the Europeans, and we will have to compensate for what is not being delivered by the United States, and that would demand a kind of fundamental political decision, like it was, for instance, for the coronavirus crisis, or when there was the energy crisis, or when there was the financial crisis in Greece, where we took very large financial also decisions in the face of a grave danger for our societies. And so far we have not done that in relation to Ukraine. I think wrongly so, we have not done that. But if Trump wins in the elections and then there's a fundamental shift in US foreign policy, we will have to do that. Otherwise, this will be the end of Ukraine, or could be the end of Ukraine, with grave repercussions far beyond the borders of Ukraine.
And so I guess we'll have under a week, we will find out. Thank you so much, Andreas Umland, analyst at the Swedish Institute of International Affairs, for being with us here on TVP World Talks tonight.
Thanks, Margaret.
And that's all for this edition of World Talks here on TVP World. I'm Diana Skaya. Thanks for watching.